Also heard some reports from students that were at Indiana State University at the time. And the consensus from them was that Corey, Mike, and Jay were actually well-known high-volume drug dealers in Bloomington at the time. So the theory here would go that through whatever kind of circumstances, either Lauren OD'd, just like flat out OD'd, or she got super drunk and, whatever. But for whatever reason, they found themselves with a dead Lauren on their hands. Mm-hmm. And since they were drug dealers...
And loaded,
instead of doing the responsible, humane thing and, calling the cops or taking her to the hospital or whatever, they decided that they would dump her in the Ohio River, which there is some corroboration to this story, though it's been redacted. Or retracted.
Yeah, I think it is.
Redacted was just a big black marker.
No, not that.
That was a jailhouse snitch thing, right?
It was a jailhouse snitch thing, but it was a weird jailhouse snitch thing in that they got a tip from the cellmate of one of the guys who was friends with them. And then they interviewed the guy who was friends with that group, and he said, "No, I don't know anything about that. I've never done anything about that, and I don't want to be involved in that at all. Absolutely not. I have no knowledge of that whatsoever." In kind of like a too frantic way.
Well,
almost.
Listen, that guy's story is hilarious, and he is probably gun shy, because if he is the one who, I love this, he got so loaded on drugs that he walked out of his house wearing nothing but a baseball cap, holding a gun, and started shooting it. And it is it's the funniest looking CCTV images I've seen ever, because you're like, wait, I mean, it's grainy, but is he wearing skin colors? Oh God, no, he's naked.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So he said that he knew the guys, and he actually said that he had helped initially with the whole dumping, and he said, said it to some jailhouse guys, and then totally retracted it.
And it might not have actually been about Lauren. That may be why he was so scared, because he may have helped somebody with a body for something else in his dealings.
The reason that it came up was because they were watching a thing on Lauren, and he looked at the pictures of Lauren and said, "Oh yeah, that's the body that I helped dump in the Ohio River."
Yeah, but the thing about it is I heard this story, and they basically loaded her into a car, took her down, and just threw her in the river. Mm-hmm. Which to me,
why didn't she float?
Well, to me, it's like that's a prescription for having the body turn up about 20 feet downstream, tangled in the brush. It's like we want to have a boat, take her out in the middle. At least she'll show up miles downstream, hopefully.
Yeah, she's not a hard drive.
No, not exactly.
No, she's not. But I don't know. I mean, it's also not crazy unheard of that people get really lucky dumping bodies.
Oh yeah.
And she got stuck, under a rock at the bottom, and
usually they pop up sooner or later, though.
Yeah, well. Or, it's possible she could have popped up and, a bunch of miles down the river, and she's a Jane Doe somewhere. I mean, it's possible.
It seems to me that every time they find a stray body anywhere within a couple hundred miles, they always test to make sure it's not her, though.
They do. That's true.
Yeah, another possibility, too, is that she didn't OD at all. Another one is that, she just, sort of lost consciousness because of a cerebral hemorrhage. And they thought she just passed out, so they figured, we'll let her sleep it off. The next morning, she's cold and stiff.
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
Maybe something happened here. And by the way, and especially if somebody had actually maybe slipped her a roofie.
Yeah.
And that's in her bloodstream, then that's kind of incriminating.
Yeah. So, I mean, realistically, when it comes down to it, I do feel that that Mike, Jay, and Corey know more, that their stories are not exactly what happened that night. I think that's just because it gives me the most closure.
I was gonna say, 'cause I've been around enough super blasted but uncooperative people. Joe and I used to know a girl who would show up, and we would be having a beer, and she'd walk in just housed, and then you would find out she had been doing some drugs as well. She would just fall flat on her face, and people would try to help her, and she was combative. She's like, no, I'm fine, leave me alone. And people were like, let me walk you home. No, people do this. Yeah. And so that's why, having seen that firsthand enough times, I'm not willing to completely say that these boys, while probably happy to get a problem child off of their hands, may not have actually done anything, and she may have just left, and there was just no way to hold her. I mean, we should tie somebody down.
Yeah, but then what do you think happened to her?
Well, I think that there is that possibility that she was just a random abductee. It happens. It's how she could be very vulnerable. At 4:30 in the morning, a very tiny girl, 90 pounds, hammered, staggering, that she would obviously be a target. Yeah, and so, actually, I think it's entirely possible. I mean, obviously, you kind of got to go, when anybody disappears or dies or is murdered or anything, you kind of immediately look at their immediate circle of friends.
Totally, yeah.
But, that's not true 100% of the time, that it was a friend or a family member or whatever who did it. It could actually have been. She was definitely a ripe target.
Yeah.
It's just a question of did the right dude, or the wrong dude, I guess, turn up at the right time.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I tried to look. I mean, it's not as if Bloomington has a rash of college-age girls being abducted and killed. There's been 3 in the last 20-some years. One was 2000 or the late 90s. And then there's Lauren, and then there was the girl.
Holly, what's her name?
Yeah, and she was a couple of years later, but they caught the dude who took her and killed her.
Yeah, and he was a big suspect in this one. I think his name was Messel. Was it Messel? Gary Messel, something like
familiar,
that. But he was. I don't know. He didn't do a great job of getting rid of Holly's body.
No.
I mean, there was one girl who was not a college student who just lived in Bloomington who also went missing, and I believe she's still missing. She was like 29 when she went missing. Almost within a year of when Lauren went missing. So certainly there is a possibility that there was just
a serial killer,
or serial abductor, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of the things that they did that. It's really weird the way they went about it, but they searched the local dump in case they could find her body, which I don't know how good of a search that you could take on an active dump site, because the theory is, somebody killed her and threw her into the trash, kind of like what Lonnie, the Grim Sleeper, Lonnie, his last name slipped my mind, or somebody didn't put her in a garbage bag and just put her in the trash. Or she was so drunk, she was trying to find somewhere to go to sleep and crawled into a dumpster, which was then picked up, not too long after, and she was crushed.
I don't know. I don't think Lauren could have possibly been that drunk. I didn't know her, of course, but I've never, in my drunkest moments, thought it would be a great idea to crawl into a dumpster and take a nap.
I would agree with that. I don't think she probably did it on her own. But no, I think, there was a pretty sizable investigation and search that happened for her, and one of the things they did.
2 weeks they spent at the dump, right?
They did, yeah. And I think they probably did a pretty good job. But I guess it's true. We can't rule out that it was just spontaneous. But I think that's all the theories.
But that's about it. Well, there's always she ran away to start a new life, which is probably not a good one.
We could hope, I guess.
You could hope.
Yeah.
There's always a possibility too that she wasn't murdered. Maybe she's being held against her will even today.
I don't like thinking about that one. Though.
I know that kind of sucks too. Yeah, it does.
No, I don't really have anything else. I mean, there's talk of people being abducted for sex slavery rings. So it's something akin to what Joe was saying, but there is illicit activity. It doesn't seem that Bloomington would be a place to go picking up girls to then take them to a larger city. It doesn't make sense.
Well, college towns.
Yeah, it's just that it's an hour away from the next biggest town, which seems to be the problem. That was the reporting.
I don't know
enough
about the slave.
You probably don't want to.
I don't. Yeah.
So really, I got nothing. I mean, I don't think that the guys did anything.
Yeah. I don't know why I do. I just do.
You just don't trust men.
I just don't trust.
You don't like guys.
College men. College age dudes.
Those 3 guys, I just do not trust for some reason.
Well, there is that, and that didn't really help their case. I understand why they lawyered up, but it always looks a little bit bad to the public.
Well, it's not the act of lawyering up. It's more the withholding of any relevant information is really the thing that looks guilty. But it's whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So if you want to see some of the links to our research, or buy swag, or see a list of all of the episodes we've ever done, You can do all of those things on our website, which is thinkingsidewayspodcast.com. You can listen to us there as well and download, or you can listen to us and stream us or download us from pretty much anywhere fine podcasts are provided. If you can leave a comment and a rating on those podcasts, that's always great for us. And don't forget to subscribe. You can find us on social media. We've got Twitter, which is Thinking Sideways. We've got a subreddit, which is just Thinking Sideways. And we have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. So like the page and join the group. And you can send us an email if you have case suggestions, if you want to talk to us about how we're wrong about everything.
Or just tell us how awesome we are.
Or just tell us how awesome we are. We do respond to all of those emails. We're getting pretty slow these days because we're getting a lot of emails.
Don't let that discourage you.
Yeah, but send us an email anyway, and
Absolutely.
we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yeah.
That email address is thinkingsidewayspodcast@gmail.com. All of that having been said, I think we're going to just go ahead and get on out of here.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah, all right. Ta-ta.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. This episode of Thinking Sideways is not brought to you by the layer of dust on your cleaning supplies. Instead, it's brought to you by Talkspace, the online therapy company that lets you message a licensed therapist from anywhere at any time. Can't imagine fitting another appointment into your life? Well, with Talkspace, therapy is as easy as sending your therapist a message. No commutes, no leaving the office, and no judgments. To match with the perfect therapist for a fraction of the price of traditional therapy, go to Talkspace.com/sideways and use the code SIDEWAYS to get $45 off your first month and show your support for the podcast. That's Sideways and Talkspace.com/sideways. This episode is also brought to you by Sharp Objects. From the author of Gone Girl, the producer of Get Out, and the director of Big Little Lies comes the HBO limited series, Sharp Objects. Amy Adams stars as Camille, a reporter who returns to her hometown to investigate the murders of two young girls. The grisly case soon brings Camille's own scars to the surface. Hailed as a top-of-the-line detective story by Variety, watch new episodes of Sharp Objects Sundays at 9 and catch up on HBO Now.
Thinking Sideways.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Thinking Sideways, the podcast. I am Devin, joined as always by
Joe.
and
Steve.
And today we're going to talk about another mystery.
Ooh.
It's a disappearance. I guess I've been on a disappearance kick lately.
Like for the last year.
Is this like foreshadowing? Are you about to disappear yourself?
Possible. Yeah. We are going to talk about the disappearance of Anna Waters, which happened a long time ago.
1973.
That was a long time ago.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was suggested by Morgan, listener. So thank you, Morgan.
Thanks, Morgan.
Probably lots of other people too, but I don't know. Anna disappeared on January 16th, 1973. She was 5 years old at the time. Anna's family history is kind of important to the story, so I guess we're going to start there a little bit. And
It's kind of a big chunk of the understanding,
Yeah.
the theories, and what all of the thoughts on it is. So
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're going to start.
So it's either very relevant to the story or depending, maybe not relevant at all.
Yeah, possible.
Could be.
Yeah.
But we think it probably is.
Yeah,
That's why it's a mystery.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anna's mother, Michaela Benedict.
Is that how you pronounce her name? Because it confuses me every time I look at it.
So I looked up a lot of different pronunciations of this. A lot of them are Brazilian, and they're like Michaela, and I'm
You sure it's not Michelle or
I
something
don't
like
think
that?
it could be Michelle, but I think it's Michaela.
Okay. Because I was really confused every time I read it. I was like, wait, crud,
I know.
So we'll go with that.
Yeah, we're just gonna pick and go.
Hmm.
She met Anna's dad, George Waters, in college. George was he was studying to become a doctor, and shortly after they were married, they moved to the San Francisco area so that he could complete his residency. Also part of this family was Michaela's 2 sons from a previous maybe marriage, maybe just relationship. I don't really know the story behind that. I know they were both born in Greece. I don't think she was married to the man, so I think that George was her first husband.
No, so that's one of the things that I was going to ask about, because I read somewhere that George was her second husband and that she was married when she met him.
It's possible.
Okay, I mean, this I don't know. I mean, I never found any clear answers.
And frankly, I didn't really look too far into that because I don't think it actually pertains to the story too terribly
probably
much.
Not too much.
You're probably right. I just easily confused, and so I was trying to figure out what was going on.
Unless the previous husband was all embittered about,
maybe, yeah, I don't think so. He was also in Greece, so...
It'd be a long trip to kidnap somebody.
Yeah. They together had Anna in 1967, which was actually the same year that a man named George Brody, maybe, came into their lives. I'm unclear how George and George met. However, they became pretty instant friends.
George squared.
Yeah, that's what I've been calling them.
And did George Brody ever come by the house and meet Michaela?
I believe yes. It was a weird relationship, and we'll dive a little bit more into that.
I've heard about the relationship, yeah.
But also, for the sake of clarity, I'm going to call George Waters George and George Brody Brody.
You don't want to say George? Oh, and the other George?
The other George. It's going to get really confusing as we get into this. So.
This is like that book that I read about a monkey when I was a kid. It was so confusing with the George all the time.
George.
Got a coworker whose name is also Joe, so he's Other Joe.
Yeah.
Except for the instances when I am Other Joe.
Yeah. See, I want to just totally get above that and just go with a last name and a first name. So Brody was much older than George. Nobody really knows by how much for certain. From photos I've seen of them, I would guess that Brody was at least 20 years older than George. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah. There was definitely a generation between them.
Yeah, I was thinking it was actually even a bigger gap than that.
I think it probably was too,
thinking it was
but
more like about 40,
I'm just being
40
generous
years,
to
Brody?
I mean, to both of them, I guess. I don't
There's nothing
know.
wrong with being friends with somebody different age than you.
No, there's not, on the face of it.
Yeah.
Their friendship was really weird. You'll see it as described as a cult of personality often, but basically Brody just became the number one most important thing to George in his life. Brody was super controlling, and George was letting him influence every single facet of his life.
This was the 70s though, and there was a lot of that going on. People were
looking for gurus.
Yes, that's exactly where I'm going. Is that there was a lot of people who said, "There's this other thing, and these people are going to tell me how to do it. And I will just do what they say." That's why the cult phenomena was so big in the 70s as well.
After the Manson murders, a lot of actually famous celebrity types were furiously backpedaling with their relationship with Charlie Manson. A lot of glamorous Hollywood types were really into Charlie.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the only guru. There was a whole bunch
there were all
of them.
kinds of them out there.
It was kind of a social norm.
Yeah, the trick with this one, though, is that Brody only had this kind of relationship with George. It wasn't like
he
had a big
leader.
following or anything. He just had this one person.
He'd
so
only
it's a little
managed
different.
to convince one person.
Yeah, it's a little different.
Although George, at the same time, in fairness, he was having some mental issues, and so that might have, contributed something to this weird relationship.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Shortly after Anna was born, Michaela and George divorced, and the number one reason you'll see cited for that was actually his relationship with Brody. But they divorced, and then Brody and George moved in together into like a really shady part of San Francisco.
Tenderloin.
Yeah,
they were in the Tenderloin. That's
scuzzy little area. Yeah.
Yeah, into the kind of, I think it was a pay-by-the-month hotel room even, and it didn't even have a bathroom in it. It shared a bathroom down the hall. And this is interesting to know because George was a working, high-paid physician at the time, and so he could have easily afforded something better than that.
Well, he was probably paying child support and stuff,
He was, and I don't know that he was necessarily a high-paid physician, but he was a well-paid physician. I think that by saying he's high-paid, you infer that he's got a level of wealth, and he probably actually did because he was working part-time at 2 jobs.
The reason that I say he was highly paid was because Michaela's book talks about him being very well compensated.
All right.
So
Okay. I never got that impression from the stuff I read.
But at the very least, he could have afforded a nicer place for them supporting Brody. But again, they could have afforded a nicer place than this, for sure.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
All right.
Michaela later met a man named Joseph Ford in 1971, and they got married.
So husband number 3.
Yeah.